Minister, as I'm sure you're well aware, Ferbane is a small town in West Offaly, and for almost a century it has had an Ulster Bank branch at its centre. And long before the RBS took it over or grew in size and strength, the people of Ferbane supported their local Ulster Bank. They kept their savings there, they borrowed to build their homes there, and they financed their children's education in that branch. Local businesses got their first start in it, and they stayed with it. And the people of Kilcormac and Shannonbridge, whom previously had sub-offices at their locations, they too stood by this bank. They too gave credence to the commitment that was given by Ulster Bank not to close its branch in Ferbane. There were 4,000 availing of its services. But now, unfortunately, that history has been placed under a dark shadow by a corporate decision from the vast sprawling building that is on George's Quay. And the executives based there in the Dublin City offices, and as the struggles of a small Midlands town can be reduced by them to an accountancy exercise. But the real impact of the branch closure won't be felt in the asset sheets of the Ulster Bank HQ. It will be felt on the streets of Ferbane and countless other rural towns like it, in Offaly and across Ireland, where many of them unfortunately are dying. The plight of Ferbane and the disregard shown towards it and rural Ireland being displayed by Ulster Bank unfortunately reflects a broader attitude that I'm afraid is evident in the way in which the government at times treats rural affairs. The squeeze being put on small schools, the closure of 140 Garda stations, the threats to the post offices and to the contracts contained with government departments, the crippling burden of commercial rates are bleeding Irish towns dry. And Fianna Fáil has highlighted these issues time and time again. And it's not as if we've remained on the sideline. We've offered alternatives. I myself have produced a document known as Streets Ahead, and that puts forward a roadmap by which Irish towns could be assisted in moving again. But the government has continually failed, unfortunately, to address the crux of the issue. What we are witnessing in the recovery that has been spoken about is the emergence of a fragile, two-tiered recovery, where economic growth is confined to a few on the east coast and the larger cities, while unfortunately the rest of the country continues to suffer. And we have to ask ourselves, is that what we want for the country? And addressing this crisis, which is and has been unfolding in front of us, like a slow-motion car crash, now must become a priority for government and for business and for corporates. And I say that because that example is evident too in a situation that has emerged over the Christmas period at a shopping centre in Tullamore, where Dunnes Stores, the anchor tenant in the Church Road shopping centre, opened its fire door onto a car park to allow customers easier access, omitting the footfall supplied to other shops in the centre. And in doing so, in defiance of the planning legislation that exists and the permission that was granted initially. And that, as I said to you, is merely an indication of the sort of example that is being shown in other areas, which is taken advantage of by these large businesses and corporates and doesn't recognise the community spirit and ethos that exists and has existed in many of these towns. And I would ask you, Minister, and you and Fine Gael now to step up and confront this crisis. And the banks too obviously need to recognise their important social role. And the people of the country, as you know too well, have stood by the banks in the past when they needed it.
Thank you, Deputy.
And it's now time to repay the favour, irrespective of the fact that Ulster Bank was not one of those to benefit from the systems we mentioned earlier. If I might conclude, last Concordia, tomorrow the people of Ferbane and its communities and the hinterland will march in Athlone in the Midlands HQ of Ulster Bank. And it will be an opportunity for them to instigate a commencement on the part of other towns, on the part of government hopefully, to stop the rot and seek in their best possible terms to breathe life back into communities. And I hope the government recognise this. And I hope you, Minister, having contacted Taoiseach, whom in turn contacted yourself on this issue, might use your good offices, might use your good influence in order to allow the CEO or impress upon the CEO of Ulster Bank, Jim Brown, to meet with the representatives of the community whom have met with high-placed officials in the bank already.
Thank you.
And whom recognise and appreciate those meetings insofar as what was contained within them in the limited efforts on the part of banks of that bank to help and ease the community to exist without this facility in place. But unfortunately, that is not where it stops. We would implore upon you to allow for and to use your influence, as I said, to allow that CEO to meet head-on with that community, to hear their concerns, to hear the commitment that was given to them in the past, not only locally, but in the charter of RBS itself, where it said it wouldn't leave a town where no other bank existed, in a grand commitment that was placed, as I said, in their charter, but which has been thrown out of the cot at this stage. I would ask you please to respond favorably in that
reply.
I wish to thank the Deputy for raising this important topic. I am aware of the concerns of Deputy Cowen and of other deputies as Ulster Bank moves to implement the closure of a number of branches and sub-offices around the country. Indeed, this was the subject of a previous topical issue debate last summer when the bank announced these closures. A number of representatives have been in contact with my officials about this important issue. I must be very clear that this is a commercial and operational matter for Ulster Bank, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Royal Bank of Scotland Group, and it would not be appropriate for me as Minister for Finance to become directly involved in the number of branches that the bank may decide to close or the selection of which branches are to close. That said, I fully understand the concerns of the bank's customers at the closures and the additional expenses that they will incur if they have to travel additional distances to avail of banking services. I also regret that there may be job losses involved. However, Ulster Bank has said that the redundancies will be volunteer-led and workers will be invited to redeploy to other areas within the bank. As with other banks in Ireland, reducing the number of branches, there are a variety of factors impacting on the selection of branches to close. In addition to income and costs, banks will also assess the level of usage of each branch and whether the premises are owned or leased in the decision-making process. I should also point out that it has been public knowledge for quite a while that Ulster Bank is seeking to reduce costs across its network and that branch closures were on the cards. The bank had previously announced its intention to reduce its network, and what is happening now is that a previously announced decision is being implemented. However, I also understand that Ulster Bank is in discussions with An Post in relation to a potential link-up to retain basic services in some locations. If this can be arranged, it would certainly be a positive development, ensuring that valuable financial services continue to be available at local level to personal customers and businesses. Ulster Bank has said that they are reducing the number of branches in response to changing customer behaviours, in particular the use of mobile and online banking. This will hopefully lessen the burden for many people. On a more general point, Royal Bank of Scotland has publicly committed to building on Ulster Bank's current position to make it a compelling challenger bank to the main domestic banks and focus firmly on customer, and I have previously welcomed this. The continued presence of a viable and active Ulster Bank in the Irish market will be important in fostering competition for banking services. It is vital that businesses and consumers have a range of banking options available when using financial services and accessing credit, all of which will become increasingly important as the economy recovers. I have previously said that I expected that the restructuring of the banking sector in Ireland and the recovery of the economy will present opportunities for the entry of new market participants. We have also said that competition is central to a functioning financial services market. Royal Bank of Scotland's commitment to Ireland can be seen as a recognition of the recovery of the Irish economy and a vote of confidence in the opportunities that supporting this recovery offers to the providers of financial services. The Deputy may also be aware that KBC is opening a number of branches around the country, and this is very much to be welcomed. I also welcome the fact that Ulster Bank confirmed that it currently has no further plans to reduce its branch numbers in 2015.
Thank you. Minister, Deputy Cowen, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Vasco. Just thank the Minister for his attendance and for his response to the issue raised. and acknowledge, as he has done, the effort and by other deputies in the House, namely particularly my own colleague in Offaly, Deputy Corkin Kennedy, who is also at the forefront on behalf of the community to seek to address this issue in a favourable manner. You say 14 of these branches are to close. Yes, it is, I believe. I think that's up to 26 or 7 in total since this process began. But Ferbane is one of only 2, Croombe the other, County Limerick in your own county, where no other financial institution or bank remains in the community after such a closure. And I'm merely pointing out in a public forum and reiterating the commitment that was made by this company and its parent company RBS not to leave any town without any facilities such as that. And I acknowledge what you've said in relation to, and indeed what Ulster Bank have said in their negotiations and discussions with the community, that they are in consultations and in negotiation with An Post to provide a facility where in these areas where they have left their own facility leaves. That having been said, I'm conscious also of An Post in another location in Offaly and Killy, where they're finding it very difficult to find a new provider to work on behalf or to enter into a contract with An Post to provide that facility. And one of the issues that is raised is the size and scale and security of any building to meet the guidelines as laid down by An Post. And you know, with the best will in the world, the facility that's available in Ferbane may not, and I can't say with any definitive manner, may not meet those criteria. And I'm conscious of the fact that Ulster Bank have been at this location for so long, as I said, up to a century. The building they have is their own. It's a fine building in the heart of the community, which may be of benefit where the unfortunate nemesis to be the case here, whereby the facility is not retained. But the manner in which this process has been done is not one which meets with the community's approval, insofar as there hasn't been a period by which the community would be, given time to explore all those other options to make sure they're in place once the fateful day arrives when the bank closes its door. And it's against that background, and it's against the background of the sort of resilience and dedication and commitment of that locality, who have met further impediments, other impediments in recent times, namely the reconfiguration of Boardnamona and so forth, the closures associated with workshops in that realm. And it came out of those processes a stronger community, I might say, and a more committed and dedicated community, which has a development association there second to none, which through its own source of raising funds has put in place an industrial park and facilities for businesses to start up in. And that very initiative shows the sort of dedication and commitment to their own locality and hinterland that is there, with the help of the West Offaly Partnership and the funding made available by Boardnamona and ESB. So, they are not immune to change. They are not immune to challenges. But they simply want fair play. They simply want a level playing pitch. They simply want to impress upon the person whose responsibility it is to oversee this organisation to meet with them at his convenience, at his preferred location, in order for them to be sure in their own minds that that community has had a fair crack at the whip in order to place their sentiment, to place their feelings, to place their commitment and their dedication and their history with its association with that institution on the table. And it's against that background that I earnestly ask the Minister, on behalf of government, having asked the Taoiseach previously, to use his influence to impress upon the CEO of Ulster Bank, if possible and necessary, I believe, to meet with this community and public representatives in order for that discussion to take place.
Thank you.
And we'll deal with the consequences of that thereafter, and that will have been the only role and the only offer of assistance that the government, I know, can give, given the fact that it is a commercial entity in its own right, which hasn't had the benefit of capital input by this government or the previous one. I recognise that and I acknowledge that. But I am also want to reiterate and allow the Minister here in no uncertain terms what I said earlier in relation to the situation for this town and many rural towns like it. The government must be seen to be more proactive in seeking to help and assist those communities re-emerge from the recent crisis in a better way. To that end, I would ask him to earnestly consider the document.
I call the Minister for Finance to conclude.
Thank you very much, and thank you again, Deputy Cowen. Ulster Bank, like other banks on the island, had insolvency problems. But of course, its parent, the Royal Bank of Scotland Group, would be under the regulatory control of the Bank of England rather than the Irish banking system. So they had their problems, and there was a point a couple of years ago, and it looked as if they'd pull out of Ireland completely. And that would be a great loss, especially in the northern half of the island, both in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland. So we had some dialogue, including dialogue with Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of England, and we got assurances that the Bank of England would support the continuation of Ulster Bank services on the island. So Ulster Bank will be there as a competitive bank, trading both in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland. But of course, because they had the kind of problems that we're very familiar with in the other banks, they began to cut their cost base, and in cutting that cost base, they decided to close some branches. Just to give you the overall picture, in June of 2014, just last June, there were 79 branches in Northern Ireland. By December, that was down to 74. And by March of 2015, it's projected to be down to 64. And then in the Republic of Ireland, there were 135 Ulster Bank branches in June 14. It was down to 125 in December of 14, and it's projected to go down to 111 in March 15. But it's still a pretty strong retail bank trading, on the high street, because the totals are 214 original branches north and south. By December, down to 199, and they hope to settle by March with 175 with no further closures. So there'll still be a very strong bank network. Now, in the particular situation in Ferbane, it's always difficult when a bank that traditionally provided services leaves. That's very hard on customers. It's very hard on residents and individual businesses. And I see your point of view. So I will respond to your request and the request of the other deputies from your constituency by asking my officials once more to get into contact with the senior people in Ulster Bank and ask them to engage with the community, particularly to further explore what they have been doing already, to see if they can enter into an arrangement with An Post to provide alternative services for the people of Ferbane and for the other towns from which they're withdrawing banking services. And I thank you again for raising this. It's a very important issue that deserves to be highlighted here.